Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Maria and I talk all things money on this channel. And for today, I actually wanted to do something different and do something that I think every budgeting person wants to learn at some point, and therefore when they get a little bit more fine-tuned with their technique, they want to share with others so others don't fall into similar traps or similar problems that we've all faced as people who work and people who get their money. So today I will be walking you guys through how I personally budget my paycheck with a sample paycheck that is not specific to the actual numbers that I get into my bank account. So I hope that you guys nonetheless are looking forward to the video and learn from it, especially if you guys are new to working and new to just getting your own money, girl. And so without further ado, let's get on to the video. How are you guys? I hope you guys are doing fantastic, and let's address the elephant in the room. Did she get a new stand? She did. By she I mean me. But actually this is a giveaway slash whatever, as a joke freebie that I actually got from Hone the Brand. Her name is Renee. She is a fellow YouTuber and cash stuffer, but she's also in Toronto. And so she is subscribed to my channel, and she has actually, I think as a joke, she sent this to me because she, I think, noticed how much of a struggle I was having with some aspects of my setup. And so she was so kind enough to send me this because she did notice that I was struggling, and because she doesn't need this extra tripod, or I believe it just didn't go with her setup, she did go ahead and give it to me. So thank you so much, Renee, once again. I super appreciate your generosity and your friendship in general. I do appreciate the fact that you got me this because this makes me so happy, and you guys will be getting enough of me soon enough. But yeah, let's go ahead and get started with the video for today. Before we get started though, I did just want to mention that if you guys are new to the channel, I don't do this very often. However, I do feel like money knowledge and financial literacy is something that goes along with cash stuffing. It goes along with being able to pay down your debts on time. It goes along with avoiding debt, or crucial big debt altogether. And so I feel like if you're not used to seeing these kind of videos from me, that's okay. I'm not a financial advisor, and I'm not pretending to be one, nor am I knowledgeable enough to give you actual advice based on your situation. That's just something that works for me, something that has worked for me for many years, ever since I started working, or at least since I started taking my money seriously, aka when I moved out and then I had like car expenses, I had rent, I had like all these things and more. So of course when the kids came into the picture. And so yeah, just thought I would share what works for me. You obviously play around with numbers the way that it works for you, and obviously if you need more actual help, like licensed professional help, feel free to reach to somebody who does have their qualifications and credentials in this topic. But yeah, without further ado, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Again, don't take this as financial advice, but this is just something that worked for me that I felt like sharing with the community. And with that being said, let's get on started. So I have my little notebook here. Don't mind the little scratches that my daughter decorate for me. I actually use this for work, but I did take some pages to be able to show you guys what exactly I wanted to talk about. So let's go ahead and go old school and do paper and pen on how I budget my pay. So in case you guys are new to working, let me just zoom you guys in the other way. I hope that is visible for you guys, and I hope that my penmanship is legible. So in case you guys are new to budgeting in general, because you guys have never had a job before, or there's something that, let's say that you are now becoming financially responsible for your own money, because maybe, I don't know, let's say that your parents were handling your money, and even though you've been working for a while, they handle all your bills, they handle all your things, and now it's on your responsibility or whatever have you. There's just something that I wanted to share. And so yeah, I hope that you guys can see here, and I wrote down some essentials here that you may need, essentials to keep in mind when it comes to budgeting your pay. So in the grand scheme of things, the most basic way that you can budget your pay is to keep in mind your income, so your total income for whether you want to do it for the month or for that particular paycheck, and then work around those numbers per paycheck. You have your income minus your fixed expenses, and the way that I personally like to do it as well is to keep track of also your automatic transactions that happen in that pay period. So here I said to keep in mind when the next payday is. So for example, let's say that you have a job where you get paid weekly, then obviously your next pay period is sooner than when somebody is being paid on a monthly basis or bi-weekly basis. If you have your money coming in every single week, then you can kind of have more tranquility with knowing that, well, next Monday you get paid, and therefore some expenses, some savings can wait, or you can just play around with it a little bit more flexibly, I would say. When it comes to having a budget that's more based on a payday that is spread out more, whether bi-weekly or semi-monthly or monthly, then you kind of have to be more strict with yourself because you don't have a next paycheck coming in just a day or so, or the following week. So I did just want to say that. And with that, the exam portion that we're gonna do here, and again, something that I wrote for myself here in my notes, I wanted to let you guys know that of course you have to keep in mind your situation. If you are a 16-year-old who has your income, you're just starting, you might work with a lower budget, but you may also have less bills than somebody who is more advanced in their career and may have one car, two cars. Perhaps they have a down payment on a house, and perhaps they have pets, or perhaps they have children and pets. You know what I'm saying? So keep your situation in mind and don't compare your numbers or your, I guess, stability or whatever goals you may have even for that money that you have saved up. Keep that in mind and don't compare yourself to anybody else. But let's just get started with our example here, and I hope that you guys can see. Let's zoom you guys in a little bit more. Oh my gosh, I keep zooming out. Apologies. There we go. Can you guys see? You guys can see. Again, basics and essentials of budgeting is that you keep in mind your income. So all your income, whether you want to work on a monthly basis or you want to work per paycheck, you can do that income minus your fixed expenses and then automatic transactions or automatic withdrawals that will be happening from your accounts every single paycheck. So, or at least until the next paycheck. So for our example here, and I'll give some examples verbally. Let's say that your total income for one particular paycheck was, and this is just assuming after tax money because we don't need to worry about taxes and how much of that, whatever. So this is the money that ends up in your bank account. If that's all the income that you're getting from a job, you would just leave it there. If you, for example, get babysitting job or a side gig job and it's additional, I don't know, $400 a month or $400 for that week or for that time period, you would add that in as well. So keep that in mind as well. But let's just say that you just have one job to keep it nice and simple. So that's your income, and then your fixed expenses. Let's go like that. Your fixed expenses, let's just say that this is on April 1st. I don't know, I'm just giving a random example. Assuming, also let's put it in here, assuming that you get paid every 2 weeks, 2 weeks between paydays, just to keep it simple for everybody. So let's say that this paycheck came in on April 1st, right? And so technically your next paycheck would be 2 weeks from that, which would be April 15th. Let's say that. Assuming that this person, let's say, pays rent, they live on their own though, they do have a vehicle that they need to pay for gas and they need to pay for insurance, but they do not have children, they do not have student loans or anything. It's just them starting their career, and let's just say until the next 2 weeks they have $1,200 to work with. And I'm basing my numbers just randomly. I'm not too sure how the market is for a lot of things, and obviously this depends on which country you are living in. Obviously US economy is doing a little bit better than Canadian economy, but you can just play around with the numbers to see what's best for you, for your child, or for whoever this works out to be for. Your fixed expenses until the next 2 weeks, which would be April 15th. Let's say that you have your insurance come out for your car, and let's just say for that, I don't know, is $350, and then you also do your grocery run. Let's say that you do it in cash or you do it in a credit card, but you like to pay off your credit card. Actually, let's do that. Your credit card bill, credit bill is due, and let's say that on your total balance you owe I don't know, let's just keep it nice and simple, $200. And this person also lives by themselves, like I said, and so the rent, they got paid on the 1st. Let's say that rent is also due on the 1st. You should have put this money aside anyways previously from your previous paycheck, but let's just say that you didn't. Let's just say that your rent is $600. Just for like a single, again, these are like weird numbers that I'm coming up with, but let's just say this is a not so hot neighborhood, not so hot city, but it's just yourself. You need your 1 bedroom, or let's say that you even have like a studio loft. You make it work that way. Let's just say randomly that you got that going on, and whether you use this credit card to pay off your bills and stuff like that, that's like on you, girl. However, I'm just giving simple numbers. Let's go ahead and just keep it like that. So your total fixed expenses is $350 plus $200, that would be $550, and then plus $600, that would be $1,150. So that was a little bit tight. I did not come up with these numbers ahead of time, but let's just say that you have that. Anyways, let's say that you have $50 that you are working with for the rest of the time, and let's say for this particular pay period until the next one, you don't have any automatic transactions coming out of your paycheck. But let's say from the 15th until the next paycheck, let's say that from the 15th to the 29th you have an automatic transaction, which is to send money to your mom, or you have a donation that you do on a monthly basis on the 25th, and so from that paycheck on the 15th to the paycheck on the 29th, the 25th falls in between. So you have that automatic transaction coming out. Let's say it's $50 coming out, and so you would kind of work around that. And obviously for next paycheck, let's say that you don't have to pay the rent anymore, or that you don't have a credit card bill that you like to pay more than just once a month. You obviously would negate this. And so anyways, we are working with just the $1,200 income, and then your total fixed expenses would be that, and then obviously you would include this in your automatic transactions as well. Whatever total that gives you, you minus it from your total income for that paycheck. Of course, if you want to budget monthly, you would accrue all your monthly income minus all your monthly expenses, which I know some people like doing that even if they don't get paid on a monthly basis. And so that kind of gives you a framework of how much in general is coming into your bank account and how much needs to leave. So let's go ahead and do that. For simple math things, the difference that you have is 1,200 minus 1,150, and then that would leave you $50 until your next paycheck. Now, this may seem like very little, but honestly, all of us started there at some point. But let's just say that this is actually your one example that you have. Let's go ahead and do that. All right, so now the next part that I personally like to do in my paycheck rundown is to focus on my debts to pay and then on my investments and savings. Of course, my income may be higher or lower than our example here. However, I'm just giving you the rundown and general framework of how I like to do things. I put here as a note to keep in mind my high interest debts versus my low interest debts. For those of you who are new to working or just unfamiliar with how things work here in North America because you're a newcomer or whatnot, so there's different types of debts. Some debts are good, some debts are considered bad. All debt is debt. You owe something to somebody else, but some debts is actually not that bad to have under your belt versus others are terrible. For example, consumer debt. So those are the things that people worry about when it comes to high interest debt. So this would be any type of credit cards that you have, cash advance, or payday loans that you have. These are usually high interest debt, and by high interest I mean typical 20%, and by typical I mean that's the standard average that I see across a lot of products that I've grown to use over the years. Versus low interest debt, for example, your student debts, your car loan debt, or for example even debts that you may owe to your government, such as the CRA here in Canada, or the what's it called, the CIA in the States. So those low interest debts are actually easier to pay off because they have lower interest, and so a lesser amount that accrues over time. This would be also in the case of a line of credit. You guys can obviously look this up yourselves online with more professional speaking folks that know about this a little bit more. And yeah, so you can compare the two. And then the other thing that I want to talk about is whether you want to focus on paying down your debts in the snowball method or the avalanche method. So the snowball method is that you pay off your, I believe it's your smallest debt, whether it's the highest interest or the smallest interest. I don't think the interest actually works into this equation, and I believe the person who came up with this is David Ramsey. He came up with this, so you can definitely look it up on Google, on YouTube, and search up some of his tutorials or search up the general guideline of the snowball method versus the avalanche. So essentially, snowball method, you pay down your lowest principal debt first. So principal is what you actually owe onto the credit card because of your usage. Interest is what the bank charges you because you are using their money. That's what credit is versus debit. But snowball, you pay off your smallest principal balance first, and then you go ahead and tackle that off. It's a sense of accomplishment because you were able to get rid of your $500 credit card paid down, and then you move on to the big dogs, which is now, okay, now I have to focus on my $750 other credit card that I have, or payday loan or whatever. So you start off with the smallest principal, and so again, it's important to keep in mind that it's the principal, not the interest, because interest does eat away a lot faster at like our debts and stuff. And honestly, sometimes you pay off the minimum balance or even a lot more on a credit card, but it's the interest that if it's very high, and if your principal is very high on it as well, it just never seems to end because it's as if you're not making any payments. But moving on to the avalanche method, the avalanche method is more for people who want to pay off their highest interest debt first, and that's because by paying down the one that has the highest interest, you're getting rid of the principal of that one faster, and so the interest that's accumulated on that principal lessens and lessens. Not the interest itself, the interest stays the same, but because it's on a lower amount, interest payments a month would be lesser and lesser. And so this one, you would pay off the highest interest balance credit card or whatever payday loan or whatnot that you may have. You pay that off first, and then you move on to the smaller dogs. So this one is kind of the opposite of this one, where this one is you're tackling the big dogs first, and this one is you tackle small fish before you go and swim with the bigger sharks. And then the second thing that I like to focus on, or the third I should say, is my investments and my savings. So this would be investing into the stock market, investing into your registered accounts that you have with the government, such as here in Canada we have the TFSA, the FHSA, and the RRSP. And then obviously after you use all those registered accounts, you can go on to non-registered accounts such as an actual taxable account. Then in terms of savings, you can also go into tangible and accessible savings, which I would consider this more low-key important because this one is also considered part of your emergency fund. Perhaps I'll just do here EF, because emergency fund should be tangible. It should be tangible because if should you have an emergency, it can't be invested into the stock market or in a registered account where you have withdrawal limits, withdrawal penalties, or even you just have to wait a certain period before you actually get your cash money back into your pocket. And so always have an emergency fund that is tangible and accessible, or if you want general savings for like a short-term goal, for example, let's say that you're purchasing a car in the next 3 months, you can go ahead and have it in cash. That way you don't have to worry about the short-term possibility of your money losing its value in the stock market if it were to go down. Long-term, the value of the stock market has always tended to go up. However, short-term, we just never know. And then I have here a long-term saving. Let's say that you're in high school and you're looking to save your tuition little by little here and there with every single paycheck. You can focus on that. It's a long-term savings because it's going to be, depending on the certificate or the qualifications that you're going for, it's going to be minimum 2 to 4 years. And then long term, let's say that you're becoming a doctor or whatever, you can go ahead and save those there as well. Or let's say that you're not trying to buy a car or a house or any big purchase anytime soon, you just want to start saving, you can do that. For example, myself, my kids are nowhere near needing braces, but I do think that it's important to saving for that because it's not necessarily a cheap expense. And so that's that. So those are kind of examples that I like to focus on. So with our example from the back page here, we have remaining the $50 from our income minus our expenses, my fixed expenses I should say, and the automatic transactions that we have. So let's say that this person in particular, and I know $50 is not a lot, again you can play with numbers to see how it works best for you. Let's say that this example, this person just, they want to save for a car in the next year or so, and they already have like $10,000 saved up. They want a brand new car, but they're going in it in a good pace. This person does not have knowledge about the stock market and they are not familiar with registered accounts, and so they just don't want to do that. Actually, instead of buying a car in the next 10 months, let's say that they are building their emergency fund, and let's say that they have already $5,000 saved into it, which is actually not bad, more than most people. So let's say that this person wants to build their emergency fund, and so they will be putting into their savings of the building their emergency fund, they're going to be putting in $20. And so let's just say that they have that, and therefore the difference between the 50, can you guys see? Oh, no, you cannot. The $50 that they have remaining from our previous example, and then they want to put in $20 into their emergency fund, which already has $5,000. Even if it was less, even if it was more, whatever number that it is that you feel comfortable with, you can do that. And so obviously the difference is, if you guys don't know what this is delta, this symbol that is used in math and in calculus to represent the difference. So the difference, a total of $30 that this person has left over after their income minus expenses and automatic transactions, and then after they consider the debts and all these things that they want to work through here. This person decided to put $20 away into the emergency fund, and now they have $30. And now moving on to the next part, which is what we most look forward to, but sometimes we negate to prioritize this stuff first before our own selves, which is your fund slash buffer money. So this person is left with $30. So just put it in here because I will forget. So this is the part that I'm talking about that people do tend to forget to prioritize last. So not that you're not important, not that your coffee in the morning is not important if you go to Starbucks every single day, not that your trip with the girls to go shopping every single weekend is not important. However, a lot of people, the problem that we run into is that we prioritize our fun before our actual priorities, whether that be bills, whether that be the roof over our head, the food that needs to be accounted for in our diet, and even like that, we're talking about groceries, not necessarily takeout. And therefore, we need to prioritize our future selves first before our unnecessary wants and needs. And by unnecessary needs, because there are some needs that are more important than others, sometimes you don't need necessarily to have a $10,000 emergency fund if you are good with a $5,000 one. A $5,000 emergency fund may be good enough for 2 to 3 months expenses depending on what income and expenses you have, versus somebody who just simply wants a $10,000 emergency fund. Meanwhile, they can't afford to build that $5,000 one more because of the debts that they have to pay. So this is all about you having to coordinate with your lifestyle and with your realistic numbers that you have. Your shopping can wait, your coffee can wait, or honestly, you can just kind of tolerate the fact that you don't need those things every single weekend or every single week or every single morning, depending on what the activity or the splurge is. Your future self matters, and then also your necessities, obviously, like food, roof over your head, your kids, all those things matter a lot more than just you want a new pair of shoes every single weekend. You know what I mean? So let's go ahead and focus on your fund money. So your fund slash buffer money is anything that has to do with, you guessed it, you. So you have $30 to spend until the next payday, because again, remember, we're working with a 2-week time slot here between one paycheck to the next. This is the $30 that you have left until the next time. So let's say that realistically you want coffee with your gals every single morning, and let's say that on average every fancy cup of coffee at Starbucks, Tim Hortons, McDonald's, or whatever it is, costs anywhere from $5 to $6. Let's just say that we do that twice a week. So $5 twice a week, that would be $10, and then the next week would be an additional $10. That would be a total of coffee spent $20. Not much that you can do. From 30 minus 20 is 10 left over. And so do we really want to spend 2/3 of our money left over until the next paycheck on coffee? That's not even necessary. I don't think so. However, we can put aside some money for ourselves. Let's say that you want to treat your mom out to something for once because you finally, started working and you want to buy her something and you haven't been able to do so because you never worked before. Go ahead and treat your mom out to a dinner, or do fun activities that are no cost, and then look for where to put this at some point. What I personally like doing is to put it into extra savings, and yes, call it boring, and then sinking funds. So sinking funds are anything that you're looking to save long term, but it's just something that you're accruing throughout the year. So for example, let's say that every single year on the dentist you spend $600 on the dentist. And therefore, every single paycheck, let's say that you only go once a year, every month you would basically have to save $50. So you could put some of that money into that, and then the remainder you can actually spend on yourself. Or let's say that you really have been wanting a purse for a long time and it does cost $60. Well, you would have to just make sure that you save this $30 or a portion of it, and then in the next few months you save that same one for, let's say, a $60 purse. You have to just use your head logically and be able to save the portion of money that you want to save for these future goals, whether sinking funds like this one, or let's say a splurge, but you are being diligent with your money. You're not just spending it on a credit card and not even looking at what's left in your bank account to pay off the credit card. That's another thing. Always try to use your credit card and have the money accessible in your bank account to pay it off right away, or at least soon after, so the credit does accrue in your credit history. But don't be the kind of person that just swipes or taps, and then you have no money to pay back off that credit card. Because remember, the credit card money is the bank's money and debit is your money. So don't treat a credit card as if it's just free money that you never have to worry about. Treat your credit card as if it was a debit or if it was cash. If you don't have the cash to pay it off in the next week or so, don't get that thing that you're wanting to get. But anyways, let's say that you drop down your $5 coffees. Let's say that you drop that down to only once a week because you just decided to get serious about your money. So then at the end of a 2-week period, that would be a total of $10 that you spent on your coffee. Fantastic. So then that would leave you with $20 left that you have at the end of that if you were to not spend on anything else. Okay, let's say that you want to get yourself, what else do we typically spend our money on? I don't know, let's say that you are a bookworm and you want to get yourself a new book. Let's say that a book that you saw while you're getting your coffee at Starbucks, a book that interests you or catches your eye, I should say, costs $15. So then you have the the one coffee that you dropped from twice or 3 or 4 times a week to just once a week. At 2 weeks, that would be a total of 10. And then you have your $15 book, which is 15. Technically, this is under your budget, and therefore you could spend all that, you know what I'm saying? And then you would still have a buffer of $5 to still spend on whatever you want. So therefore, at the end of the 2 weeks, given the example that we gave, which I know the numbers were kind of weird, but you do have that money that you could either leave in your checking account to be able to always use as a buffer. You have to consider also keeping a buffer, I would say, into your checking account in case you have like transaction fees at the bank, wherever you go or whatnot. But it's always good to accrue long term. But these are just silly examples that I'm giving. Again, the dentist and the purse were just sinking funds that were for your fun, bigger expenses. But if you aren't worried about sinking funds, or if you don't want to worry about those long-term things in the future, you just want to worry about yourself. Again, prioritize yourself last. Unfortunately, that's just the part of the money thing that we never get taught as kids. But anyways, prioritize yourself last, and then with the $30 that you have until the end of the 2 weeks, you can get yourself a $15 book. You can get yourself 2 coffees, but just once a week. In a 2-week period, that would be $10. The book was 15, and then with this example, 30 minus the 25, which is the total here, we have $5 buffer until the next 2 weeks. And so yeah, that's basically it. So that is our example, and this is also based on a zero-based budget. I did forget to mention that a lot of people use a zero-based budget because it basically just makes it easier to give every dollar that comes into your account a job in particular. So every dollar goes somewhere, whether it's savings, whether it's expenses, whether it's bills that you need to pay, whether it's mouths that you need to feed here with the kids or whatever it is. Every dollar has a job, and therefore the zero-based budget does make most sense for most people because you're not having like a surplus that then you have to figure out something with. the surplus was already figured out and accounted for in your income versus expenses and savings and investments and whatever, and therefore everything at the end should be zero. So I think that's why it makes sense for most people. The last thing I did want to say is that you can always consider doing this my way. You can do it in the way that other people do their budgeting and stuff, but I did just want to mention something real quick, and it is to consider different ways of doing your savings, whether it's through digital trackers or budget sheets that you have online on Excel or a particular service that you may be aware of. I know a lot of like apps, for example, they have a way of tracking your expenses. If you just link them to all your bank accounts, they link your income minus your expenses, and they kind of tell you along the way how much money you have, and they also give the statistics of like, okay, well, on food and entertainment you spent this much, on gas you spent this, etc, etc. So you have those, you have the linked apps, you have digital trackers and budget spreadsheets that you can keep track of yourself. I personally will show you guys one in a little bit, and you guys also can do something like this, pen and paper. I personally do a combination of both because I'm the kind of person that I need to make sure of all my steps a million times, and so I first write down things on paper and pen. I'm kind of work with the numbers here and there, briefly speaking, and then because I know that obviously Excel has the built-in functions and that you just kind of familiarize yourself with, and those are quicker to calculate by the computer versus if you're just over here like clicking and tapping, entering numbers into your calculator, and you may even make a mistake by just inputting them into the calculator wrong or your cell phone. On the spreadsheets that I use for Excel, which I'll show you guys in a minute, those ones you can see what formulas you put in. And so for example, let's say that you were supposed to put, I don't know, that you spent $5.60 on a coffee, but by accident you forgot to put the period, and so it thinks that you're spending $560 on coffee. You switch it and you're able to see that in the spreadsheet so you can make your edits. And the last thing I'll say here is that it is up to the person how they choose to do their budgeting, planning in general. A lot of people like to do things digitally because it's like quicker and stuff like that. I personally, I love pen and paper because it's more tangible, and also some studies have been published in the last few decades and such that it has been found that people who write on pen and paper are more likely to remember the things that they write, and therefore you might be more able to memorize your budget in general, like how much you're able to pay or how much you were calculating at the beginning of the month for your coffee expenses or your investment expenses and stuff like that. You may be able to remember those things a lot better had you written them down versus just putting them in a spreadsheet. I personally like to use both, like I said, but it is up to the person. Another thing that you guys may consider, especially for sinking funds in particular, you may prefer digital products versus cash. I know depending on the type of lifestyle that you have, or even like the states or the provinces that you live in, banks may not be that accessible to you, so maybe that's why you prefer going the digital route, or maybe it's just because it's easier and not dealing with so much cash on hand. Other people may like the fact that it's cash because it makes you more responsible and more nitty-gritty about getting your expenses in order. So even though some expenses may come out of your digital bank accounts, a lot of people put that money separately in their cash envelopes or their cash binders and stuff because it makes them more responsible to save it instead of seeing it in their buffer or seeing it in their digital bank account and then they want to go ahead and spend it. So it really depends on the person. Nothing wrong with the way that you do things, or for example, if you want to have it on a sheet of paper instead of a spreadsheet, you can do that, and all these. And so yeah, I personally like to do a hybrid method, which is what I do here, plus my online spreadsheet, which I'll show you guys right now. So you guys, so I am just doing this in case, like on my camera, in case my mic on the computer is just not working properly, and also in case you guys can see and hear me a little bit more audibly here. I do apologize with the noises that you might hear in the background, but my baby is just watching some TV behind me. Anyways, so I did just want to share my budget tracker because it is something that, well, we obviously have discussed to some degree here in this video. With the different options that you have different options when it comes to how you want to do your budget and how you want to make sure that your outgoing money is not more than your incoming money, aka your expenses are not higher than your income, and if they are, how we can work things back to kind of turn some things down a notch. That way you are not constantly spending more than what you're earning, because if that's the case, then you're constantly in the negatives. So you do have pen and paper, as I did disclose before. You have the hybrid method, which is a paper and pen with some digital stuff. So this is my budget tracker. Now this is the, as you guys can see here, this is the YouTube version of my monthly template in case I ever wanted to sell this as a product or whatever. You guys are not like looking at my personal stuff or whatever it is. So I did just want to walk you guys through basically what I do when it comes to my budget. So essentially I would fill this out at the beginning of the month with the effective dates and everything, and then estimate where I want to have most of my money go into. So for example, for groceries, I know that on a typical month we spend no more than $700 each person, so I would put that here as my expected value, and then actual, I just go ahead and add in numbers here and there whenever we do go shopping. Now for groceries specifically, because we do split it half, my husband and I do put the actual dates and the numbers that I spent versus what he spent, and then at the end of the month if there's a difference where one person spent more than the other, then that person who ended up spending less does send the difference to make it fair for the other person. But of course, you and your spouse or you and your partner may have different livelihood needs and stuff, or maybe you want to do it more of instead of like half and half. If one person significantly makes more money than the other, perhaps you guys want to do a 2/3 versus a third, or 75%, or whatever it is. That's between you and your partner. Now that's for groceries specifically, but of course we do have some other expenses here. So for example, here we have debt payoff. So for debt payoff, we do have the categories here on the left side in the red chart. I did used to use this method, and now I use another type of method, but essentially speaking, you will be putting in the types of debts that you are actually paying, and then the amount would show up here in the debt payoff actual column. So let's say for whatever card, let's say X card, you paid, I'm not going to buy expected dates because credit cards, you definitely have your expected minimum balance plus like the interest and stuff, but I'm just putting the total that you actually pay towards that card. So say you paid 65, and you will see that the debt payoff will show up here. And let's say for I don't know, ABC card, you ended up paying $100 for that month, then total that you see here, which is accumulated here on the totals E30 cell, it would show up here as your total debt payoff. Now the reason why I stopped using that method is because what you're paying towards your debt is not necessarily, especially credit cards, is not necessarily an additional expense. You use the credit card for something, to get something, and then now you're paying that money back. Obviously it doesn't work foolproof, because if you spent $100 on the card at some point to get $100 worth of groceries, for example, yet you are paying only like 50% of it, it's kind of weird because it then carries over to the following month. But my spreadsheets are not so complicated and complex that it would catch how much rollover you have for that category, and then again for like none of my categories. So that's that. You kind of have to play around, or even search the market, or search Etsy or different YouTube creators to see what they do. But yeah, that's essentially what I used to use for debt payoff. I ran you guys through the grocery list here, and then variable expenses, that's anything that's not concretely the same amount every single month. So if you, for example, sometimes fuel a lot, but your car runs great on gas, and you fueled one month, maybe you don't have to fuel the next month. In terms of your massage therapy, chiropractor, psychotherapy, or any type of other things or whatever, let's say that one month you felt very generous, but the next month you weren't able to donate so much, or you're tithing or whatever, or let's say that you cancel the subscription, you added more subscriptions, all those things change per month. And so yeah, those are the variable expenses. And then your income sources are here. I just labeled them the typical income 1, income 2, whether that's one income that you're focusing on, or if that's like, for example, you have 2 jobs, if you want to do the total of that. So for example, let's say that you work at Walmart, that's your one income, and you want to focus that for the month, you can do that. Or you can do per paycheck. So for example, let's say that Walmart only pays you twice a month, so you would do that with the income, so paycheck number 1 essentially, and then paycheck number 2. But if you do have 2 jobs and then you want to do the total for the month, you can do 2. I just like to break it down so I am more detailed as to where the money came from. Same thing with side gig work, and then if you get any gifts or whatever, for example, you can add this column or erase it, but I personally like to keep it in case I ever get e-transfer from my friends, or for example for my birthday or for Christmas. I always like to do that. Fixed expenses, I just left the typical fixed expenses there. Notice that groceries is not on there because groceries can vary month to month, even if it's like a $10, $20, or $50 difference. It's not a fixed expense, I would say. So that's why I specifically called fixed expenses / bills, because here you have your cell phone, for example, tenant insurance, car insurance, if you have a pet and you pay pet insurance for them, that's that too. Another thing for income, if you get income from the government, I know here in Canada, I don't know about other countries, but we do get the Canada Child Benefit. And so if you have children, it's usually a consistent amount of money that you would get, assuming that your number of children doesn't change. And yeah, and then for the other side of the spreadsheet here is for the cash categories and cash sinking funds. I did opt to do this differently for myself, so I'm working around and tweaking things here in this tracker in case I ever do want to put this up for sale. But essentially you are basically just keeping this up whenever you do cash budget your stuff. So you do have your first paycheck here. I have PM, which means previous month. That's just what works for my personal income. We get paid on the last day of the month, and therefore I move that towards my next month's expenses. And so the mid-month payday is for that month, and so the total money at the end of the month that you wanna, if you want to keep track of how much is in your sinking funds, assuming you're not spending from them, you do have that money as well, which in theory should be whatever you cash placed here, cash placed here, and then any rollover that you have from previous months. This is in general something that you would have to manually keep up with a lot. That's why I don't personally use this. Let me go to my actual cash binder stuffing tab, which is right over here, and go to a month that is clean so you guys can see what's up. So I'm just skipping to May because we're not in May yet. At least I don't think by the time you guys see this video. But in May, so for example, as you guys can see here, this is what I was talking about. So PM, so previous month 30th, or the last day of the previous month, that goes towards the current month, and then the midway paycheck, that's also for that current month. And then I personally get the CCB, Canada Child Benefit, which is on the 20th of every single month. I'm just gonna keep it here. I'm not gonna scroll down because there's some other personal categories that I don't exactly want you guys seeing right now. But essentially I have this column here, which you would just essentially change this input. So for example, if I was currently cash stuffing a particular paycheck, I would go ahead and add whatever from the very top to the very bottom. I would add whatever categories there are. So for example, for household, let's say that I want to stuff 10 for that particular payday. For groceries, let's say I want to do 300, gas, car wash, etc. Let's say I wanted to do 45, takeout, let's say I did nothing for charity because I'm just that tight on money, I don't know, 15, etc, etc. You guys get the deal. You guys fill out your numbers, and then I would make sure that I change here the column. So this is R, so this would change to R4, which is from this first cell, I'm pointing with my finger, which is from this first cell here. And then I would change the second column prompt that tells you to fill in for the formula. I would also change it here, so it's now just focusing on this R column here. So let's say that I summed everything up to the bottom, then this in theory should be the only, for this example purpose, this should be the only thing that is actually being considered into the sum of this. But as you can see, this matches with the sum that I have here with these numbers. So that's what I do for every single paycheck. And I do the cash budgeting, I do my paycheck breakdown in general. Like I plan my things out on paper first, which I can show you guys in a different video because they're so interested. But basically put the numbers here on my digital spreadsheet, especially for cash sinking funds and also for certain expenses. I do that here because I like to just make sure that everything is tweaked and everything. And then the good thing about the spreadsheet that I have here, the way that I formulated it is that for every month, so for every paycheck, the total of that paycheck, except for the things that go into the wallet, that's just the way that I personalized it, everything that goes, so it's not exactly the 370. So let's say that I was also cash stuffing like different sinking funds, it would go into that sum, and whatever sum minus what you guys saw at the top, which was the wallet stuff, would be here. So for example, let's say just for ease purposes, for you guys to get a clear picture, I in total stuffed $400 into sinking funds and into my wallet, but only 30 of those are going to my sinking funds, aka money that I'm not supposed to be touching anytime soon, unless, you know, the actual reason for stuffing that fund is upon us. Why the difference is because I want to see the difference between the wallet stuff versus my actual cash stuffing categories. As you guys can see here, this is the 30, which is different than the 400. Now, why is this important? Is because I like to keep track of when things got stuffed for my other future stuffing purposes. So for example, I'm not going to constantly stuff the same categories all the time unless they're very frequently important to me or a priority in my life. And so I don't, not only do I not stuff them all too often when I don't need to, but also so I see here on the bottom, okay, so this paycheck I stuffed 30, and this paycheck I stuffed whatever, and then that sum of these three at the bottom, which is per paycheck, that would show up here. So let's say that on another one, just for example purposes, for the paycheck of May 15th, I got paid X amount, and then I put 20 of those dollars towards my car home emergency sinking fund. So then you see that the total here is 50, but it's only considering the sinking funds, not the wallet stuff. And the way that I did this, I connected this to my other tabs, which I will not open here because it does have like legit numbers that I work with. But essentially this sum would appear somewhere on my spreadsheet, which shows the total that I actually stuffed for the month when it comes to my sinking funds. And so that's the way that I chose to organize things. I know that unless you're actually doing it yourself, it might be a little bit confusing. That leads to the next topic that I wanted to share with you guys, which is practice makes perfect, and practice what you like and discard what you don't enjoy or don't benefit from in the budgeting system. So whether you're doing cash and you don't like it, or you're doing digital and don't like it, only continue practicing the things that actually benefit you. If this digital tracker is a little bit too confusing for you, don't use a digital tracker. If pen and paper takes just far too long and you forget things anyways, or your hand cramps easily or whatnot, don't do the pen and paper method, you know what I mean? Or maybe you have to shop around, like I said, on Etsy or small shops who offer digital products in order for you to be able to organize yourself in a better way. Now, with that being said, at first you might need to go through some trials and tribulations for you to figure out a method that works for you. And with that, I would suggest that you do whatever method that it is that you're doing and choosing to do. You go ahead and try it out for, I would say, 3 months minimum, to make sure sure that you know at least what you're doing and what you don't like about what you're doing versus what you do like about what you're doing. There's different strokes for different folks, and what works for you may not work for me, and vice versa, and therefore we have to test things out. I'm just sharing what works for me, but of course if this is too complicated or if this is just too much going on, of course figure out a way that works for you, which may not at the end of the day work for somebody else. You know what I'm saying? At the end of the day, your money is your money, and the way that you handle your money and organize it is what's important for your journey to prevent huge debt, to make sure that you are saving for the goals that you want, etc. So with that being said, give it some time, see what works, see what doesn't, and then tweak it here and there as you go. My battery's about to die, so I will close you guys off with the rest of the day real quick, but I won't go into a little prayer. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. I hope that you guys nonetheless learned from it. Give you a big thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and until the next one guys, without my battery dying, I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.